and welcome to Modelling Misadventures. Now, after a little bit of a break, I'm back on with the FAB1 pink Rolls Royce from Thunderbirds. Now, I've got to admit that I've put this on the back burner for a little bit because I've been dreading the next phase of this construction, and that is to try and find a way of making the glass canopy that goes over the top of the car. Now, one of the problems in trying to model this canopy is that it seems to come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Even in the original Thunderbirds episodes, you can see pictures like this where the canopy seems to be quite low and very sleek, and you can see others where actually it's quite high up and tall. And in some of the toy Fab ones that you can get, it varies dramatically. In the Corgi version, as you can see here, it's got a very tall bulbous canopy, very round, whereas in the dinky car version shown here, it is a much sleeker canopy. This is a little Matchbox Fab 1. Again, it's got the tall bulbous canopy design, and this is a more faithful representation of Fab 1, and you can see that the canopy is much lower and again much sleeker. Now I'm going to go right back to the beginning of this project when I made this little 3D printed prototype, and I had a go at 3D printing a canopy for this little small version. Now, unlike the rest of this model, which has essentially got flat pieces or circular components, the canopy on Fab 1 actually has some quite complex curves on it.
Now, my starting point for this canopy design was to go back to the original drawings of Fab 1, as you can see here. Now, the canopy in this version is certainly much lower and sleeker than the ones that we saw in the Corgi toy or the Matchbox toy versions. I then copied those drawings into PowerPoint and could use the drawing tool to draw basic line drawings around the periphery of the canopy in 3 dimensions. So I ended up with 3 drawings, one from the top, one from the side, and one from the front. I then imported those drawings into Tinkercad and converted them into 3-dimensional shapes, in the hope that I might be able to create some kind of canopy from those basic parts. But that actually turned out to be totally impossible. So I then tried using this shape in Tinkercad known as the Bezier bean. And this is a shape that you can alter and create some quite complex curves on. Now you can see here that this Bezier bean is quite a complex curve shape to start with, but there are a number of menu items here that you can alter to alter the radius, the curvature, and the overall general shape. Now, after faffing around with that bean for ages and shaping it, cutting bits off, slicing it up, I came up with this rather crude initial effort, which you can see is nowhere near good enough. So after even more faffing and playing around and cutting and slicing, I finally arrived at this, which was my very best effort that I could actually get to using the Tinkercad program.
So that's what that prototype canopy looks like. Now I've 3D printed it, and not really very good, is it? So you put that on the little car. You can see it's looks quite stylish in a retro sort of way, but it doesn't really look anything like Fab 1. So that's been a bit of a disaster. Can't do that on Tinkercad. I just don't think it's possible. So this is why it's taken me a long time to get round to having a crack at this, because I've had to start trying to learn another 3D computer-aided design program, and I've turned to something called Fusion 360, and it's actually really difficult to learn it, and I haven't learned it properly, but I have started having a go at seeing if I could design this canopy on that program.
So this is what the Fusion 360 program looks like. When you open it up, you get a workspace like you do on Tinkercad, but it does have a whole lot more functionality. You can see across the top here there are all sorts of different commands and functions that allow you to create shapes, three-dimensional shapes, curves. It's actually got so much more functionality than what Tinkercad has. So what I was able to do in this program is import the 3 diagrams that I'd drawn from the blueprints and create this kind of three-dimensional representation. I could then use those templates to create some sketches and then bodies, which basically formed these formers or frames along the line of the canopy outlines. Now this is where the magic really happens. There is a function on this program called loft, and loft allows you to join together a series of structures and it will fill in the gaps in between them. So as you can see here, I'm just clicking on each of these frames one after the other. We can keep working our way from the back to the front, and the program will compute the shortest path in between these frames and fill in the gaps. So we're just going to keep going all the way to the front. I think there are 17 frames in this design. When we get to the front, just click the last one, and then we're going to save this as what's called a new body, and when we click OK, it is going to create that three-dimensional complex curve structure, and that is now starting to look really nice. So here are just some views of the 3 different planes, here from the side, from the front, and here from the top. And this is what it looks like in more of a 3D orientation. And you can see here as we twist it round, it's actually looking pretty good.
So I've 3D printed a miniature version of that canopy just to see what it looks like. And if we put that on the little model car, you can see that that is looking way better than the one I was able to do on Tinkercad. That's actually starting to look really pretty good. So next I wanted to try scaling this up just to see if it was going to fit on the full-size car. Now I started off just by printing a few layers of the bottom of this canopy just to see if it would fit. And you can see when I try and put this on here, it's not quite the right shape at the front. So I had to go back and have another go at it, and second attempt a bit better, but still not a perfect fit. And so here we went once again, and now that fits perfectly. And I've done the same for the back, and put that on there. You can see that I got the outline pretty good. That's going to be a nice fit. Now this is my first attempt at printing a full-size version of the canopy. It's so big I had to cut it in half and print it in 2 halves on the 3D printer. But this is what I've got, and let's see what it looks like on. Now that is looking pretty good as a first attempt. Now unfortunately, when I did the back half, it won't fit because it's catching on these seats. So the canopy is either going to have to be made higher, or these sides are going to have to be a bit more vertical. So time for a redesign. Well, I've had 3 goes at this canopy now. And I'll just show you what they look like on. So that was the first one, and the back half wasn't tall enough to fit on and it wouldn't fit over the seat. So on the second attempt, I had to raise it a bit higher. This was version 2 and it fits pretty nice, but I ended up with this rather sharp line along here that I didn't like. So this is version 3, and it's a slightly more rounded shaped canopy, a bit like what you see on the Corgi toy, but I'm fairly happy with that, and it does allow everything to fit inside quite comfortably. So I was quite chuffed that I was able to 3D design this and then print it and get a canopy that I'm fairly happy with. But the question now is, what am I going to do with this? So I've got two options now really for how to proceed with this. The one that I think I'm going to end up using is to try and turn these into molds that can be used to make a vacuum formed canopy. That's one option. Option 2, and I've got to say this is a bit of a long shot, is to try and 3D print this in clear PLA, clear 3D printing plastic. Now I've seen examples of this online and it doesn't come out clear at all, but I thought, why not have a go? Let's see what happens. So I've printed a scaled down version of this canopy in clear plastic, and that's the result. Well, I don't think you'll be able to see Parker and Lady Penelope through that. It certainly isn't clear. But I have seen somebody online who's attempted to make this more transparent by sanding it and covering it in clear coat. So I'm just for fun, I'm going to have a go at that and see if it's possible to turn that into something that you can actually see through. So I'm just going to have a go at sanding this with finer and finer sandpaper and see how smooth it gets. Well, here it is after sanding it, and it's not going to get there, is it? It's a disaster. So I'm going to give up on that, and it is back to plan A. So my only hope now is to try and use this as a mold for vacuum forming. So I've printed out another one, and I've made this one slightly smaller because obviously the canopy is going to go over the top of this. So I've got my two canopy pieces printed out, but these are now going to need a little bit of work to get them into a position where I've got any hope at all of using it as a mold for vacuum forming. So I'm going to start by gluing these two halves together. Now the biggest problem with this canopy is that it's made of a type of plastic that's not heat resistant, and in vacuum forming you suck a sheet of hot plastic over the surface of it, and there's a possibility that this may collapse under the heat and pressure. Now this join in the middle here will help with the strength, but this is still not strong enough, I think, to withstand that process. So I'm going to line the inside of it with this stuff called Builder's Bog. This is a resin based filler, and it sets very hard and will give this canopy a lot more tensile strength. So this is the bottom of the canopy after it's been strengthened, rock hard that. So that's not going to give way. Now it's time to do something about the top. You can see it's a bit rough, so I'm going to have to sand that smooth. Now as usual, it's taken a long time to sand this smooth. I've had to use a little bit of filler, but now I've actually got a really smooth surface on this canopy. I've been able to shape the front a bit better as well. Well, here I am at Acrylics Plastics in Adelaide, South Australia, and I'm hoping these guys are going to be able to make my canopies. Well, it's looking hopeful. Well, I've just dropped them off and spoken to a very nice guy called Chris, who's taken the molds and gonna have a crack at them. Obviously don't know how they're going to turn out, but we'll see when I come and pick them up. Well, here I am back at Acrylics Plastics, and they've told me the molds are ready. Let's go and see how they turned out. Well, here they are. I've got them home, and I had 2 done, and you can see they're pretty big. So this is the Fab 1 canopy, and at the back it's the Thunderbird 4 canopy. So just having a look at these, this one's pretty good, but you can see it's got a flaw here. That's entirely my fault. That's a flaw in the mould. But the rest of it looks pretty good. There's a mould line on the inside of there as well. This one, it's collapsed here. And again, entirely my fault because the mould must have collapsed on the second attempt. So not strong enough. And while we're at it, this one's a disaster. This was for Thunderbird 4. You can see something really strange has happened to the mould. I don't know what's created that. I think the heat and the pressure has caused that to collapse like that. I don't think that's going to be any good. But these ones, I'm sure I can make something of this. But what I'm going to have a go at is seeing if I can polish out from the inside that imperfection. Right, that's it after sanding with 600 grit. And I'm hoping I'm going to be able to get that back to shiny. Well, there it is after 2000 grit. I hope I've made a complete mess of this. Right, 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 and 10,000. That's 4,000 grit. That's 6,000 grit. That's 8,000 grit. That's it after 10,000 grit. Right, now it's onto the polishing compounds, and I'm hoping that these guys are going to get rid of all them scratches. Well, that's as good as I can get it with sanding and polishing, and it's still not how I want it. So I'm going to have to try something else. So I've had a go on the spare one at spraying the inside with clear coat. And look at that. I think that's going to be the answer. See all the scratches on that side, and the clear coat made them almost invisible. So that's what I'm going to do. Spray it with gloss clear coat. Now I've got to figure out a way of cutting this canopy out, and I'm going to give it a go with this, the Ryobi rotary tool. Alright, just gonna go around it with these snips. Well, there's a rough cut. Not looking bad, is it? Just tied it up now around the edge. Well, this is it, the final stage. I've sanded it and polished it as much as I can. I'm going to have a go now with the clear coat on the final canopy. This is it, fingers crossed. If this doesn't turn out, well, there's not much more I can do about it. This has gone wrong. I've put too much on and it's run. You can see those here. Oh dear. Well, I've made a lucky discovery here. This whole layer of gloss clear will peel off in one sheet. Look at that. That means I can have a second crack at it. Isn't that amazing? Look at that. Oh, that saved the day, hasn't it? It's all come off, so I can have a fresh start. Okay, here we go again. Well, it's not perfect, but I think it's going to be as good as I can get it. Shall we have a look to see what it looks like on? Well, there it is. That's been a long time coming. But although it's not perfect, I think it actually looks okay. I'm actually happy with it. Well, that's been a real marathon, and Didn't know if I was ever going to get to this stage, but here it is with the canopy on, and it's all right. Not perfect, but good enough for me, and I think that's the best that I could have done. So I'm really glad to be at the end of that stage. I'm going to call it a day there. That's been a long time coming. There are a few extra details to put on this car to finish it, but for now I'm going to call it a day and to say thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Modelling Misadventures.